Want to go now? All right, Buck Creek. Here we are. We're live, broadcasting all over the world at this moment. Thanks very much, Max, for that. We'll start off with a land acknowledgement. I am standing on the land of the Buck Creek Community Hall, ceded land, and in Buck Creek Town or Hamlet, in the province of Alberta, and soon to be the nation of Alberta. And you have to give me a second. I got a croaky throat. I'm going to drink some leftist tears here. Oh, they're salty. Oh, boy. They must be upset. I've been traveling all over Alberta with my good friends Nadine, Wellwood, and Bruce Pardy to bring information to you. Because you're all here to sign, which is really awesome. But what comes after that? Once we get to the referendum and we blow the numbers out of the water, what comes after that? And this is what we're here to share with you today. There's going to be about an hour worth of speeches and then an hour worth of Q&A. And maybe we can get some off the internet as well. So if you're watching on the internet, go ahead and put your questions in. We'll do our best to get to them. My name is Jason Lavigne. I live just down the road on the 616 between here and Breton. And I'm the host of the Lavigne Show. And I've been working really hard to bring these conversations to you. We've done over 700 guests on our show in the last 3 years. Everybody from Bruce, Nadine. Ooh, we just have a special guest arrive. Bruce, Nadine, the Premier herself, she's been on a couple times, MLAs, ministers, counselors. We've been doing all of this because we want to talk to the people live and bring true information to you. So if you haven't checked out the show yet, you can see our table back there. You can grab a card and then check out the show, because this is how we do it. You can't trust mainstream media anymore. Anybody trust mainstream media? That's what I expected. So I really appreciate you being here to get the information direct from people like Bruce and Nadine. And I couldn't be more proud of Buck Creek for showing up here today. Every month there's going to be a local market here, so do come back again next month. And over the signing period, up until May, we'll be doing events like this all over the place. So if you know somebody that wants to sign and hasn't been able to sign yet, you can go check out stayfreealberta.com, and they will publish locations there for signing. And if you need more information about all of this, you can go check out Alberta Prosperity Project for the educational portion. And then, of course, my show, if you're looking for interviews with wonderful people like Dr. Roger Hodgkinson, who's just sitting down here. Are you guys familiar with his story? Doctor, if you don't mind. Early, he told the truth. And they told him, shut up, just go with the narrative. It'll be best for you. He said, no way. Nonsense, he said. No way. He's paid a heavy price. So if you get a chance after to say hi to him, please do. He's a lovely, lovely man. And he's only been telling the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help you God there, Roger. I appreciate that. Make sure you check out some of the vendors as well. These are all local people who brought the products to you so that you can check it out. And what we're going to do is now get started. Who's excited to hear the speakers? Nadine Wellwood has been traveling all over Alberta for years now to talk to people about things like the pension plan for Alberta, the benefits of it, and why we should bring it forward. She's also ran for senator, I learned, and got 100,000 votes. That's impressive. And she's also been running as an MLA. She ran for the PPC party. She's obviously very dedicated to serve the people and help represent. So I couldn't be more pleased that Nadine's with us here today. Thanks, Nadine.
Yes. Well, hello, everybody. I heard that you guys are a really rowdy crowd. That's amazing. So many of you have already heard a lot of the arguments, and many of you here to sign the petition. And so, you've heard all the grievances. Equalization payments, pipelines, C-48, C-69, all those reasons why we should leave. So what I thought I'd focus on a little bit today is more along some of the more recent things, and discuss maybe where our Prime Minister is today. Yeah, I'll let you chuckle on that for a little bit. So the independence question is a lot bigger than just the grievances. And it's not about emotion. It is a very rational decision that we should be making. And I prefer to make it looking forward. I don't want to drive the vehicle looking in the rearview mirror. So Alberta has been abused, yes. Alberta has done and Ottawa has done all these things to Alberta, absolutely, undeniable. But let's look at our future. How many people here have children? Grandchildren? Covered everybody. I love it. So what about their future? Because the world is reorganizing. It is not the same world that it once was, even 5 years ago. We had just last year a prime minister who got elected saying that he could deal with Trump. Now, whether you like Trump or not, Trump has a plan, and he's also the president of the largest economy in the world. That hasn't changed any. Now, we have a prime minister today that is over in China, negotiating a new strategic partner. But if you listen to what he said, he's talking about deepening cultural ties. How many people in here want to deepen cultural ties with a communist country? We're into some danger zone here. But Alberta, we have a very unique opportunity to chart our own path. to make our own decisions separate from that of Ottawa. Now, the question comes is, are we brave enough? Do we have the fortitude, the courage to see it through? Because as Bruce is going to explain to you, we don't have all the answers. It's a bit of an adventure. We're not sure how the outcome is going to look like definitively. So we have to decide today whether or not the risk is worth the reward. And when I do that, I assess not from my perspective, but from that of the future of my children. Do I want to be aligning with a communist country, or do I want to be aligning with the free world? So on that note, I want to talk a little bit about the National Security Strategic Plan. So the National Security Strategic Plan that the United States has just put out. Now, this is not just a campaign. It's not rhetoric. This is an action plan. This is the direction the United States is going. Have any of you heard of it? Yeah, perfect. Have any of you read it? I encourage all of you to read it for one simple reason. The world will make a lot more sense to you. So you've heard of this place called the Arctic. No, haven't heard of it? I don't blame you. We've kind of forgotten about it for a while. And Greenland. You've seen what happened in Venezuela, right? When you read the National Security Strategy, you'll understand, more broadly put, what Trump is up to. We are going back to the old days of the Monroe Doctrine. Now, are everybody familiar with the Monroe Doctrine? Yep. I wish people would teach these things in school again instead of boys or can be girls. Let's get back to some fundamentals, shall we? But that's the era in which we live. They're turning everything upside down. Now, do you know how the Monroe Doctrine got its name? President James Monroe. He was uncontested when he ran for his second term. Nobody would run against him. And it was his ideas that you are now seeing resurface. He got rid of half the national debt of the United States by introducing tariffs. Not taxes, tariffs. He also united all of the states economically. And then in addition to that, he had this idea of securing the Western Hemisphere. And you're hearing this language come up again and again, yes? So the Western Hemisphere, he made it very clear. He says, this is under U.S. influence and U.S. protection. Now, I got a question for you. Who do we share our longest border with? The United States. Is Canada not in the Western Hemisphere? Yes. Do you not think that Canada is perhaps taking on a bigger fish than maybe we should be and realigning ourselves with China instead of trying to negotiate better terms with our southern partners? Now, one of the other things I want to talk about, because people talk about the economics and we need to, develop new partnerships. So Carney just said that we're going to bring 49,000 EVs into Canada. Good idea? Yeah. Well, we're giving them preferential treatment because they're such an amazing strategic partner. The same China that just last year was apparently our biggest national threat to security. But all of a sudden, 1 year later, now we've opened up the doors economically and said, come on in, we're going to give you preferential treatment. What do you think that is going to do to the auto industry in Ontario? It's going to destroy it, right? And it's already struggling. So Doug Ford had a bit of an awakening yesterday, or the day before, I guess now. And he's like, well, maybe I should choose my friends a little more closely. Okay. So that's just one example. But I want to talk about the difference because Carney's over in China, but Trump is bringing industry back to America. He has made it very clear there is no way that we are going to continue on the path that they have been for decades. And that is a path of United Nations and unelected people, from transnational corporations through to EU regulations. He is withdrawing from that. And in the withdrawal from that, so the World Health Organization, UNESCO, the UN climate policy, all of it gone. The United States is going to do what is right for the United States, and it's putting America first. Do you honestly believe that Mark Carney is doing that? Absolutely not. He sides with the globalists. He's a banker. And I'm going to be very blunt. He has got a plan to destroy our country. Now, Albertans, do you want to be a part of it or don't you? I don't. So let's go back to Trump for a second. Reindustrialization, bringing the industry back. He is setting up a self-sufficient America that, despite whatever happens in the rest of the world, American people will be safe and protected. He is giving the power back to the middle class and out of the hands of the globalist. How do I know this? Housing. So we all have a housing and an affordability crisis, yes? Housing has come up in the news many times. Here's one of the things that Trump is doing. And I don't want to stand up here and say this is, Trump is good man or bad man. I'm talking policies that he's implementing. Okay? And with respect to housing, what he's done is he has said that, have you heard of these companies called BlackRock, Vanguard, State Street Capital? All these big institutions that have used your money to crowd out the middle class from being able to afford a house. Well, Trump has said no more. He is putting regulation into place that says, you know what? These big institutions can no longer acquire residential homes and crowd you out. Everybody wants to blame the market. It's not the market, it's the politics that is creating this affordability crisis. He's also told Freddie Mae and Fannie Mac, he says, $200 billion, go get it, secure it, mortgages, bring the interest rates down for the middle class. And yet we have Carney, who is destroying jobs, inviting Chinese communist cultural deepening of ideas into our country. So again, this is where we come down to, we have a decision to make. And I just lied to you because now I'm going out of frame there, Max. So sovereignty is back in the United States. And what does that mean for energy? Because we are an energy powerhouse. And I want to talk a little bit, because I had a gentleman come up to me last night and he said, my son-in-law is an economist. And he says, economically, Alberta cannot make this work. I said, really? Wow. Remind me not to work with that gentleman. Because I said, have you heard of this country called Norway? It's kind of Alberta-ish. Oil and gas, small population of 5 million. It has the largest sovereign wealth fund right now of anywhere in the world. That's a really bad example for us to follow, right? Alberta could never work. It's these silly sort of things that come up that I just give people a moment to pause and ponder and to think about what it is that you are saying before you say it. Because if Norway can work, oh my goodness, Alberta has more resources than Norway. We have a highly skilled labor force, young demographic. And with that in mind, I'll talk a little bit about your Alberta pension plan discussion. So many senior citizens are so afraid of losing $864 a month. They're willing to bet the future of their children and their grandchildren to vote down separation. Does that make any sense? Do you know what the CPP is and what it is not? The CPP is a Ponzi scheme. That's exactly what it is. It took $1 out of the taxpayer, walked it across to a retiree and said, here you go. And when they realized, demographics were changing, they said, we're going to have to increase the cost to the taxpayer and decrease the benefits because they can no longer sustain it. And these changes have happened again and again and again. Now, if this was your pension, would they be able to make the changes like that? No, it's not your pension. It's not even a pension at all. It's a payroll tax. That's what your CPP is. Nothing more than a payroll tax. And they walk the dollar over to the retiree. Now, when they started this program, they got away with it for a little while. See, this is the problem with government policies. Sometimes you don't always relate the outcome with the actual cause. Inflation's another one. Inflation happened the day they started the printing press. But we don't experience inflation until we start to see the prices increase 3 years later. So going back to the APP, when they started this Ponzi scheme, there was 7, 8 people working to every 1 person retired. Now today we have about 3 people working for every 1 person retired. By 2035, I believe it is projected we will have 2 people working for every 1 person retired. How do you feel about carrying 2 households? That's your reality. So I want to mention Frederick Bastiat, because he wrote this little book called The Law. And in this book, he talked about the proper role of government. He also talked what the role of government was not. And he talked about what this little thing called legalized plunder. He said the role of government is to protect the liberty, the property of its citizens. What it was not to do was to provide for them. Now, he said when it starts providing for them, it opens the door to this mechanism called legalized plunder. What's legalized plunder? Is when I give you special treatment, I give you special interests, a special platform, but the problem is in order to give you something, I have to take it away from you. And that's what government does. And this is the difference between Ottawa and Alberta and East and West. Because we have a different mindset than the East Coasters do. Why? Because when they had the opportunity to be a part of the free America and that took on the British Empire, guess what happened? I see you, Max. Guess what happened? They said, no, thank you. In our polite Canadian way, they added the thank you, of course. No, thank you. Why? Because they were British imperialists. They believe that the government should have the power, the control to direct you. Now, Albertans are different. We came up, most of us, from the South. We're more American than Canadian. And that mindset is very different because that is the pioneering, the risk-taking. And you know what the difference is? One says the government should do something for us, right? How many times do you go and, oh, the government should do something about that? Here in Alberta, what do we say? Get out of our way. And that's 2 very different mindsets. And therein lies a problem, which is why we've always been contradictory to one another. So Jack Mintz put it this way. He said, countries break up for one of 2 reasons. The first one's a matter of taste, culture, heritage. You see that with Quebec, right? Very different culture, very different heritage. Alberta has that different heritage. We have a different mindset. We don't want the government in our business. We want them out of our business. Now, the other one he said was claim. That's the economics. Now, how many of you believe that Alberta needs Canada to survive? Nobody, right? It doesn't make any sense. We are the economic engine of Canada. We are the ones who have added the positive, as small as that may be, to the GDP of Canada, the gross domestic product. But yet Canada still has the lowest productivity of any country of the OECD. Why? Why? This is a policy problem that is coming out of the East. This is not a problem of resources or talent. We should be the wealthiest country in the world. There is no reason why any Canadian, let alone Albertan, should be paying taxes. Because you know what? Saudi Arabia doesn't pay taxes. Why do we? Oh, well, we have to pay for the roads. Well, they have roads. Oh, we have to pay for education. Well, they have education. So why is it that here we are, the wealthiest nation in the world, should be? Because what's money? I had a young man come up to me last night. He's 12 years old, and he said, you know, if we were to separate, what currency do you think we would use? So the first thing I said to him, I said, well, what is money? And he said, well, and I said, well, let me help you out with that. He said, is money what you think is the dollar bill that's in your pocket? Is money the dollar bill in your pocket? Yes or no? It's not. All it is a piece of paper with some ink printed on it. It's a promissory note that says, oh, the government promises that this dollar is worth $1 so that you can exchange goods. That's it. There's nothing real about it. You know where the real wealth lies? It lies in our oil and gas. It lies in our timber. It lies in our water. It lies in our people. Because none of that is any good unless we have the skilled labor and the entrepreneur who's willing to take it and do something with it. And that is why Canada is one of the wealthiest nations in the world. Money is not the dollar bill. That's just the means of exchange for convenience. So with all that in mind, when we look today at what we want to do and where we want to go, it comes down to courage, in my opinion. Somebody asked me last night, they said, what is the biggest risk to this failing? Here's the answer. We are. Do you want an Alberta that is different from the Canada we see today? Or do you want to just replace Ottawa with another overlord in Edmonton? This is going to be the big question. So this is the question that we need to answer because, and Bruce is going to touch a lot on this about treaties and about the questions of what comes after the referendum. And what comes after is no small feat. We have the opportunity right now, a blank sheet of paper. What do we want to put on it? What do we want the new Alberta to look like? And you know who that is up to? It's up to us to decide. Not up to some politician, not up to some organization or one individual who happens to be louder than everybody else. It's up to us. We get to decide what is the new Alberta. And I personally am not standing up here and spending time away from my 14-year-old daughter because I want to keep the Canada inside Alberta. I want that gone. And so without further ado, I want Jason to come up and introduce Professor Bruce Pardy, who is going to share some other facts with you. And I guess then we'll be back for a Q&A. Thank you.
Great job. Give it up for Nadine. She had to leave her family behind just to travel around in her big truck all over Alberta to do this for you. So thank you, Nadine. So far, what do you think? Now, Bruce Pardy is from Ontario. Don't hold it against him. He's been looking at MLS listings, so he might be your neighbor one day soon, because he does believe history is happening here, and this is what's needed to fix Canada. As he goes through his presentation for you, understand that some people talk one way, and other people talk other way. At the end of the day, we're going to figure out what we need to do when we get to that point. But he has a really good view of what's coming, and I'm really, really pleased that he's here with us today. So Bruce Pardy, all the way from Ontario, his last stop on this little tour, and a friend of mine. I like to call him older brother, but let's be frank, much older brother. Good luck, brother.
Thank you, Jason. Thank you for coming. I am the interloper from Ontario. And people have asked me, you know, what the hell am I doing here? And the answer is that you have a moment. You have an opportunity that comes maybe once a lifetime and maybe once in a civilization. And if you don't take it, it will be gone. In your hearts, there may be a Canada that you know and love. You know, that country, that true north, strong and free. A land of opportunity, a fair country, a just country, and above all, a free country, governed by the rule of law. A country whose flag you may have flown, cheered on at the Olympics and on the ice. Maybe you have served this country. But over the past 6 years or so, maybe longer, an ugly truth has been revealed. And that is this, that this country that you know, recall in your head and maybe your heart, that you feel attached to, this country does not actually exist. There are two Canadas. One is imaginary, and the other one is all too real. What is the real Canada? It's possible that Canada was once a free and noble country. Maybe. I'm beginning to wonder. In 1775, as Nadine was alluding to, in 1775, George Washington invited the Canadians, as they then were, to join the Americans in their revolution, to try and get out from under the thumb of the British king. And the Canadians said, as Nadine described, they said, no, thank you. They wanted to be subjects of the crown. Foundational stories go a long way. The foundational story of America is freedom. The foundational story of Canada is deference to authority, with some knee-jerk anti-Americanism thrown in. We come by it honestly, and it sticks around. Those ideas are with us still. When I was a teenager, about 16 or 17, I got it in my head that I should go to the capital to see it, the place that is the capital city of the country. Got on the train, sat in the gallery of the House of Commons, visited the Supreme Court. But the lasting memory of that trip for me was a t-shirt. I remember walking down the street somewhere near Parliament Hill, past a guy wearing a t-shirt, which said, Ottawa, we run things. And my 17-year-old self thought, they think they run the country. And then later on, I went to law school, became a lawyer, became a law prof, spent 35 years, looking at these things and discovered something. I discovered that they are right. They do run the country. And I don't just mean the feds. I mean, sure, the feds run a lot of things, but I mean governments. Canada is run by governments, federal, provincial, municipal, local, agencies, bureaucrats, politicians, courts. The state runs the country. And if you are looking for a reason why Canada is broken, that would be at the top of my list. So I want to make an argument to you. The argument goes like this. It has 4 steps. Number 1, Canada is broken. Number 2, it cannot be fixed. Number 3, in order to save yourselves and possibly inadvertently to save the country, Alberta has to go. But number 4, leaving is not enough. It's very important that Alberta leave the Canada that is outside Alberta. But you also need to purge the Canada that is inside Alberta. Because Alberta runs an awful lot like Canada. There's an awful lot of Canada inside Alberta. You must get rid of it. So if and when you get to the stage of deciding how this new, free, independent country is going to work, here are the kinds of things I suggest you do not do. Don't take what you know. Don't take the Canadian Constitution and say, oh, well, we're familiar with this one. We can make a few changes. Let's just adjust it a little bit. We'll take out these names and put those names back in. We'll have our overlords, not in Ottawa, but in Edmonton, and we'll carry on the way we are. Okay? If that is what happens, this project will have been a failure because you haven't changed anything. In fact, you might even make the case that you've made it worse. How could that be? You've gotten rid of Ottawa. Now, that's a good thing. But what you've done instead is take all those things that Ottawa does, all the powers that the federal government has, and you've given them over to Edmonton. Now, Edmonton already has powers. You know, we have a federation. The feds do some things, the provinces do some things. What you've done, instead of diffusing and minimizing and limiting the power of government to tell you what to do, now what you've done instead is you have concentrated all the power in one place. Now the people in Edmonton who think very much like the people in Ottawa, Edmonton runs things too. And now they have all the power. So the thing not to do is to keep what you're familiar with just because you're familiar with it. Clear the table. Start with a blank slate and ask yourself this question: what kind of country do you want? And one of the things that Albertans are saying, and thank goodness for this, is that they want to live in a free country. So what does that mean? You get rid of the bureaucrats. You get rid of the people who have power over you. When are you free? I'm going to suggest to you, well, my answer would be this. You are free when you are not being coerced. That is, you are not being made to do things you don't want to do. You're not subject to the force, that is violence, of other people like your neighbors or the state. In other words, your actions are voluntary. You can decide what to do, with the only one exception, that you can't force other people what to do. That's the state of being free. Now, why are you not free now? Because Canada pretends to be a free country, the true north, strong and free. It's turning out not to be the case. Why is that? There may be lots of reasons, but here's one of them. The way the Canadian Constitution works, the way it's set up, is this. It has a default position. The basic thing that it says, and not in as many words, but essentially what it does is say the state, and by that I mean the federal government and the provincial government, the legislatures, the executive branch, the courts, all together, all the bits of the state together. The state has unlimited power. It can do anything, literally. It establishes this general principle. The state can look out for the general welfare, the common good, the public interest. And then what does it do? Well, then it creates exceptions. And what are the exceptions? Well, those are the charter rights that you think that you have, right? So the state can do anything except it cannot infringe your freedom of speech, at least in theory. But then another thing happens. The Constitution creates an exception to the exception. The state can do anything except infringe your freedom of speech, except if there are reasonable limits on the freedom of speech. So here's the bottom line. We think we have these big, grand rights and freedoms laid out in the Charter. They are just exceptions, small carved out exceptions to the general rule. And the general rule is the state can do anything it wants. And the courts will often allow them using this other exception to the exception. So what do? If you are starting again with a blank slate, well, the first thing to do is don't do that. Second thing is, all right, so how are we going to design a constitution that doesn't lead to that result? My suggestion has been this. Take that default, the all-powerful default, flip it on its head. Here's what I would like to see the new independent Alberta Constitution to say. The state in Alberta can do nothing. It has the power to do nothing. Except, you want the state to do some things. So what do you want the state to do? What do you need a state to do? Because if you don't want it to do anything, you don't have to have one. But if you don't have a state at all, then what is likely to happen? Well, you have no police, you have no courts, you have no military, you have nothing. Those are all state functions. So if you have nothing but anarchy, you're likely to get violence in the streets, people imposing upon each other, the people with the biggest guns. You don't want that. You don't want lawlessness. So what are the things that we want to list as the legitimate things the state can do? Here's my first suggestion. Number one, the state can do nothing except keep the peace. You want to be able to call the police. You want to be able to prevent people from assaulting you and stealing your car and invading your house. Okay, that's number one. Number two, the state can do nothing except, well, resolve disputes. Let's say you have an argument with your neighbor about, anything, where the fence is. You need a court to go to resolve the dispute. You don't want to end up fighting with them. You want a place to peacefully resolve disputes. And number three, the state has no power except you do want it to protect the country against foreign powers from the outside, people who might attack you, invade you, take you over. right? So for my money, those are the first three exceptions, first three functions that the state legitimately ought to perform: keep the peace, resolve disputes, protect the country. But not very much else. You are flipping the default. And if you are able to do that, then you are on your way to purging the Canada that is inside Alberta. What other features should this new Alberta have? I'm going to suggest to you this one. If this Alberta is going to be a free country, one of the things that it must do is follow the principle that everybody is subject to the same laws and standards as everybody else. Because that's not what we have right now in Alberta and in Canada. Now, why is that important? Well, because if that is not the case, then the opposite is the case. And the opposite is this, that the state, whether it's the bureaucracy or the politicians or the courts, the state can decide to apply different rules to different kinds of people. Okay? And now you are subject to their decisions and discretions and whims about whether or not they're going to favor or punish the group that you happen to belong to. In other words, this idea is one way to restrain the state. This is supposed to be the idea in Western civilization, right? Justice is supposed to be blind. We're not supposed to take account of who your parents were or what kind of genes you have or the color of your skin or whether you're a man or a woman or rich or poor or black or white or straight or gay. Same rules for everyone. One of the reasons that so many people think that Canada can be fixed is that it still rests on the pillars of Western civilization. You know, the rule of law and private property and free markets and equal protection of the law and separation of powers and all of those great ideas. And the fact of the matter is that those ideas do not apply in Canada very much anymore. The law itself has been changed and is changing. And how can that be? Because the law is controlled by institutions. And the institutions themselves have been taken, captured, corrupted by a set of ideas, by an ideology. And in order to fix the country, you'd have to retake the institutions and change the ideas. And that's not happening. So you are in your own country. If you are going to apply the principle that the same rules and standards apply to everyone, that principle has implications. One of the implications is that in an independent Alberta, Aboriginal rights will not exist, because that is the idea it's based upon. Different rules for different folks depending upon who your parents are. That has to go. But what about treaties? Let's just take a step back. Treaties are arrangements made many, many years ago, as you know, between people who were present at the time and who are now all dead. Arrangements made between peoples and the crown. One of the things that I hope will happen in a new and independent Alberta is that there will be no crown. Right now, Canada is ruled by the crown. Here are the kinds of things you must get rid of. The crown, the Westminster system of government. Those are, for my money, those would be the first two things, along with the idea of Aboriginal rights. Now, Aboriginal rights are deeply entrenched, both in the law and in the culture that we have in this country. They are viewed as the natural order of things, but they are actually the reverse. Think through history. Invasion, migration, and mixing is the history of humanity. It's happened everywhere, all over, all the time. What happens Well, at first, it seemed to be an invasion. And it's understandable that the people who are in a place will resist an invasion, just like we would want our governments to do if somebody tried to invade us. But it happens. And after it happens, what happens is that the people mix. Generations carry on. Not only do the people mix, but their children mix, and they produce offspring. And then their children do the same thing. And when you look back, suddenly you realize that there are no longer two separate peoples involved. There is one people with a culture that is different from the culture that was there and the culture that was brought. So the example I like to use is Great Britain, but this has happened all over the world. But let's just talk about Great Britain for a minute. Imagine that in Great Britain, you had the same approach that we seem to have with respect to Aboriginal rights. Imagine that in Britain, they had different rights and entitlements for people who were descended from, let's say, the Romans who invaded Great Britain long ago, and those who are descended from the Saxons who invaded after the Romans, and for the Normans who came later after that. Let's say the law in Britain tried to distinguish between people on the basis of their lineage, Roman, Saxon, Norman, or a whole bunch of other groups. And your rights, your legal rights, your financial entitlements depended upon whether or not you could identify Roman or Saxon or Norman heritage. The fact of the matter is, nobody in Britain today is going to be pure anything. And that's the way it's supposed to be. You're going to have mixing. The idea of trying to identify peoples, plural. You belong to that group, and you belong to that group, and therefore we're going to treat you differently. That is exactly the opposite of the way Western civilization is supposed to work. So if you want a free country, that is one of the first things that needs to go. And there are many other ideas and details here that need, I think, to be put in place for the new Alberta, so you get what it is that you are after. You are after a free country where you can live your own life and be self-sufficient and cooperate with your neighbors, create commercial enterprises on a contractual basis, and not be interfered with by overlords that think that they know better what it is that you ought to be doing. In the Canada today, you can see what is happening. We are in a managerial age. A managerial state tells us all what to do. How to carry your groceries, what kind of car to buy, how to think, what to say, who to hire, what kind of medications to take. And moreover, Canada itself has become a kind of a grift. Right? Legalized plunder, as Nadine put it. Everywhere you look, somebody is on the take. Right? You know the lists. Politicians and their pensions, government contracts, crown corporations like the CBC, Aboriginal elites, universities, and so on and so on. There's a whole long list of outfits, protected industries, supply management. There is always somebody there taking money from the till that's collected from a very few other people who are the very few who are actually now paying in. Mostly it's being taken out. And the people with power are plundering what is left of the prosperity in this country. Okay. So these are the kinds of things you need to escape, but they are also the kinds of things that you need to defeat. Okay, and those are two distinct tasks. Number one, to escape, and number two, to defeat. And those are both going to be challenges. You're on the first challenge right now, and that involves signatures, and involves a referendum, and getting a good number on that vote. But once you're there, then you have to do task number two. And task number two is to defeat the system that is now in place in Canada and in place in Alberta. so that you are not taken advantage of in the way that you are being taken advantage of right now. And with that, I'll stop and perhaps we can have some Q&A. Thank you very much for coming.
Jason is coming.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Check, check. Thank you very much. Do I have to stay back, Max? Okay, so if you want to ask questions, come line up in the middle here and we'll get you in there. You won't be on the camera, but we'll get your voice in there. So how was that though? Did Bruce open your mind? The flipping the default from all powerful government to not powerful government. What do you think of that one? They don't have to assign you rights. You have them already. They need the right to govern you. So I like that flip the default. Do we have any questions right now? You just raise your hand. I can even come to you. Here we go.
Not really a question,
Be in front of the speakers.
not really a question, but could you elaborate more? Like last night, I heard your speeches last night, and I thought they were great. Could you elaborate more on your talk about Daniel Smith? That was quite interesting last night.
So one of the challenges we face, and Bruce is very good at bringing this up as well, is that we have to purge the Canada out of Alberta. And that's not going to be easy to do because currently we have a government that doesn't necessarily support Alberta independence. She thinks that Alberta should be sovereign within a united Canada. So I had a premier's dinner that I attended in August, I believe. And she was asked point blank in a room of 200 people. And I was sitting from maybe her to Max. And she was asked, if Alberta achieves a yes on a referendum, would you get behind that? Would you support that? Her response was, it is my job to make sure you don't get there. Now, read into that, because it wasn't, if Albertans want to proceed down the path of greater independence, I will come back, we'll reconsider, let's see how the independence movement, there was none of that. Her job was to make sure that we didn't get there. So we've got some big challenges ahead of us as to who is going to negotiate on our behalf when we achieve, because we will achieve, that yes vote on the referendum. Who is going to be the one that goes to Ottawa to achieve that? And Bruce, I'm going to let you elaborate because you talk quite a bit about the risks that come after the yes on the referendum.
Right. So forgive me for is this working all right?
Yeah.
Yep. Forgive me for getting into the weeds just for a minute, but there's a legislative angle to this that I think you need to know about. You may be aware that the original APP question, when they proposed it, was referred to the court. And it was referred to the court because of a section in the Citizen Initiative Act, Section 2.4. That section said, essentially, you cannot propose a referendum that will have the effect of contravening sections 1 to 35.1 of the Constitution. That's the Charter of Rights and Aboriginal Rights. Now you might think, well, asking a question doesn't contravene the Constitution, but that's not what it means. What it meant was, and this is what the court said, that section means that you're not allowed to propose a referendum on independence. Why? Well, because independence will result in a repudiation of the Constitution. And that means those sections of the Constitution won't apply. That's a contravention. Now, the good news is that the Alberta government brought forward a bill, Bill 14, to repeal that section. That was great, because that just removes that problem. And that's why you are now today able to provide your signature to the petition. However, in that same piece of legislation, the very last section also makes an amendment to the Referendum Act. It adds a section to the Referendum Act. It says this. The other part says, well, you know, if you hold a referendum, including on independence, that referendum will be binding, and the government of the day will be obliged to carry out the mandate. This new section says, except if the referendum will result in contravention of sections 1 to 35.1 of the Constitution. What that means is that the referendum on independence, in fact and in law now, is not binding on the government. The government can decide if it wants to carry out the mandate in the event of a yes vote. So here's the scenario that might occur. It's just a might. Nobody knows exactly. But what might occur is, especially in the case of a close result, a close yes, the government of the day might decide that it takes the mandate from the referendum, goes to negotiate with Ottawa, makes some kind of a deal, like gets policy concessions of some kind, comes back and says, good news, folks, we don't have to go now because we have these policy concessions. We took your mandate from the referendum and we've used it to make another kind of deal. We don't need to go, and that's the end of the story. And sort of a bit like the MOU for the pipeline that won't be built. Right? Once you have negotiated using the mandate from the referendum, the best argument probably is that the mandate is done. Like, you can't just keep going back. If your government representatives come back and say, good news, folks, we finished the negotiations, we have a deal, then you're not going to be able to say, we don't like the deal, go back and do it again, because the mandate may be over. So there's going to be some very important moments after the referendum when it's going to be an inside Alberta battle over who it is and what they intend to do using the good result on the referendum.
And to back Bruce on that, I had Bruce Pardy and Honorable Mickey Amory on my show, because Amory wrote Bill 14. And Bruce asked this exact question, and Mickey Amory confirmed that Bruce's interpretation is correct. We did highlight at the episode that Amory himself doesn't consider it the independence referendum contravening. He doesn't, because there's a procedure through the Supreme Court and Clarity Act. However, the decision stays with Premier Danielle Smith. I had her on a couple of weeks after that, and in two different ways, I asked her that same question, and her response was get the signatures, and we'll talk after that. So tune into the Lavigne show May 3rd, where she'll return, and she'll have to answer that question.
And that's one reason why it's so important to get a good result on the referendum, right? Because if you get 50 plus 1, then that's technically a win, but then there's a split, right? But if, for example, you got 60, then your government wouldn't dare, because they think, well, if we go against that, we're going to lose the next election. So this is all very much a political set of considerations.
We have a question here.
Good discussion, thanks. Randy from Buck Lake. So one of the questions that I do have, it's not going to be a light switch if it's a yes. It's not, oh, look at us, we're free to go, we're going to become our own state. That's not going to happen with a light switch, it'll be a dimmer switch. So my question to you is what does our governance look like? What is in our Constitution? We're going to have laws. There has to be laws, whether it's for speeding, and of course we have some silly ones that we won't get into, but for speeding, for assaults or whatever, like you mentioned earlier. So there has to be that type of law. What is your, or the group's projection on what our Constitution will entail,
Yes,
and coming down from the Constitution,
yes,
how will we be governed? Like I'm
Yes.
pretty sure Wetaskiwin is going to stay
Yes.
the county of Wetaskiwin, and it'll have
yes,
have those certain things.
right,
Then that's my question is, explain to us our Constitution,
yes,
because it will happen,
right,
and how the Constitution is going to provide governance and how the people will have the control over the governance.
right, right. It's an excellent question. And many people are asking this kind of a question, which is, what is it going to look like? It's a fair question. But the honest answer is nobody knows exactly, because that answer is going to be formulated by people in Alberta, and they're not going to all agree. And one question is going to be, who are those people going to be? How do we pick who the people are going to be able to do that task? That in itself is a good question. The answer is partly going to be, in large part, who is in political power at the time that this happens. They are going to have the first shot at identifying the people who will have the power to formulate what will become your new constitution. Now, here's what I hope happens. I hope you will get to participate in some kind of a constitutional convention. And these questions will be put on the table in a transparent way. And I've written a constitution that I think I would like to see Alberta adopt. It's just an idea. That doesn't mean it's going to be adopted. There are a whole lot of other people who want a different thing. And that's part of the reason why I'm suggesting to you that it's not a good idea to adopt what you already have or a variation of the existing one. But a lot of people in Alberta want to do that. They do want to do that. They want to give you an Alberta that is mostly unchanged. Why is that? Well, partly political. They want to win the referendum, and I understand that. But they think, in order to persuade the people on the fence in the middle, they're trying to assure those people, don't worry, nothing really will change. Okay. And as I said earlier, if that's the result, why bother? Well, what are you trying to do? Right. So you'll hear this kind of a message, like, don't worry, you'll still have your Canadian passport, you'll still have your CPP, we'll still have our single payer public healthcare system, the public education system will still be the same, and so on and so on and so forth. The treaties will be honored. Okay. All of those things need to change. All of them need to change. Now, how you get to the change is a very political process. And therefore, it's a process that nobody can actually determine ahead of time what's going to happen. I sometimes compare it to this. Imagine that before 1776, the residents of one of the 13 colonies said to the revolutionaries, well, I might support the revolution. I'm no real fan of the king, but I need to know first, what kind of a country is America going to be? What's going to happen in the future? And of course, nobody knew. Nobody knew. What you are doing is making a leap. You know that the situation you are in now will not do. And you are looking for something else. And you're going to have to work out what that is altogether. And there are going to be disagreements. But what you are engaged in here is nothing less than a political revolution. I don't mean a revolution in the violent sense. I mean a political revolution. And the outcome is uncertain. But the thing that you do know is it gives you the potential to create a society that works in a way that is way better than what you have right now. Let me go one step further. It is possible that Alberta could save Western civilization itself, right? Because what kind of a state all the Western countries are in. The thing is unraveling. And here in Alberta, if you have a majority of the people who are determined to be free in the genuine sense, you can put together a constitution and a way of governing yourself that shows the rest of the Western world the way it is supposed to be done. You can be the new America. And when I say you can be the new America, I don't mean that you will join America. I mean, you can be the new America. You can be the country that says, we need to do this differently, and then create a new way of doing it.
If I can just add one thing to that, well, two things. One is we have to include as many Albertans into this conversation as we can. Everybody in this room is pretty much in agreement, but there's a lot of people, slightly left of center who are not sure. So we have to find a way to open a dialogue with them. And one of the ways that I found best to do that was because nobody wants to be preached at, right? Nobody wants to be, I'm going to tell you what to do. That's why we're here, because nobody wants to be told what to do. So how do you start the conversation with those people? How do you start the dialogue? And Jason has been kind enough, as we've been going around, I wrote a book called Alberta Rising. It is available on Amazon, and sadly, we don't have any books because Paula back there did such an amazing job at selling them all out last night. But I do have a book, and the purpose of the book was written because it talks about many of the ideas that Bruce and I have talked about: licensing and registration, taxation, public health, education. There are places, and it gives examples around the world that are doing it so much better. But it's really about getting people to think. So here's how I use the book. I give it to somebody, and I say, it takes you 90 minutes to read this book. I'm going to give you a week. I'm coming back for a coffee in 1 week. Tell me what you disagree with. Now you've given them some information and the ability to prepare in advance for your conversation. Because oftentimes they don't even know where to start. Like if I gave you a blank sheet of paper and said, hey, tell me what the new Alberta is going to look like. Most of us would be like, oh, I have no idea, right? But sometimes having that little outline where to start helps. And then it gives them the ability to have the conversation with you. Now, the other one is, this is the warning. We have to be careful in Alberta not to exclude the voices that disagree with us. Because even inside this movement, we have some pretty loud voices who have their opinions as to how, Bruce is laughing, the new Alberta should look. Treaties is a big one. There's a camp that says we should have treaties. There's a camp that says we shouldn't have treaties. But if you agree with one rule of law that applies to every citizen equally, we cannot have treaties. And it was actually Leighton Gray who does an amazing job. And because he starts his speeches with, I am Indian number ... And he speaks to it. He goes, if you truly do not like the Indigenous population, keep things the way they are. We are not doing them a service. The Indian Act is not freedom. It has enslaved them.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry. And we have an entire Aboriginal industry now that props up this, again, special interest, right? And the government has the power. So you have these interest groups that lobby so that they can feed from the trough.
And that industry serves two constituencies: Aboriginal elites and the bureaucracies and officials and lawyers and so on that support them. It does not support or serve the interests of rank and file Indigenous people. It is just the elites and the bureaucracies. Those are the two powers that insist that this system carry on.
Max, there we go.
More of a statement than a question. We're talking about constitutional things, and 250 years after the Declaration of Independence in America was signed, here we are signing our own. Some of the things that I want to see in the Constitution is: 1, I'm keeping my Bible; 2, I'm keeping my AR-15; and 3, I'm keeping my paycheck.
I don't think you're getting any disagreement from anybody in here.
Hi, this is a question for Bruce, And it's regarding the application of the Clarity Act after and if there is a yes vote. I have 3 questions. First of all, who determines and what determines what is a sufficient mandate? Is it 60%, 70%, 80%? Okay. Secondly, can the federal government use the debate over the interpretation of the Clarity Act as a stalling tactic? And third, in the event that there is a difference between how the provincial government interprets the Clarity Act and the federal government interpretation of the Clarity Act, who has ultimate authority and jurisdiction? And is there any legal literature already established? And if not, what would be your legal opinion on what would happen?
Right. All right, great question. So this all begins with a Supreme Court of Canada judgment made in 1998 about Quebec. And that judgment says that a province can indeed separate from Canada if it holds a referendum and the majority of people support it. That gives the province the mandate to negotiate. It doesn't give it a unilateral right to leave, but on the other hand, the federal government and the rest of Canada does not have a unilateral right to stop them. What that triggers is a mandate to negotiate the terms of leaving. And the Supreme Court emphasizes this. Those negotiations are political in nature, not primarily legal. In other words, don't come running back to us if they're not going the way you want, because the court is not going to get involved. The Clarity Act is the federal government's expression of what it believes the Supreme Court of Canada decision means. It has set out its own criteria for the question and the process so as to sign the federal government on to the process in an approved way. Okay? So it would be beneficial to satisfy the requirements of the Clarity Act. On the other hand, the Clarity Act is federal. It is the federal government's essentially legislated opinion about what the thresholds and the requirements are. All of this lays out a path. And the courts have said over and over again, yes, there is a path. This can be done. However, at the same time, it might be establishing expectations that are unrealistic. Here's what it looks like. It looks like step 1, step 2, step 3, you negotiate and you're gone. You shake the people's hands and you leave. Okay? It's probably not going to happen that way because there are so many vested interests in Canada that will be threatened by Alberta's departure. In fact, you might go so far as to say that Confederation, the way it is right now, might not be viable without Alberta. And so the people who oppose this, you should expect them to pull out all the stops and try to defeat it by hook or by crook. And the thresholds and the requirements that have been set, remember, were set for Quebec. And there is no guarantee that along the way of this adventure that you might not get powers that be trying to change the goalposts on you. Like, oh, well, that was the case in 1998, but now we require you to do X. I don't know that, but I wouldn't be surprised either, right? So don't lose sight of the fact that what you are embarking on is a political revolution and you're going to get a lot of pushback. And you must be prepared for the powers that oppose you to try and undermine the legitimacy of what it is you're trying to do. So there are steps to take. The court will not have a primary supervisory role over it. It's going to be a political process. And after that, who knows what's going to happen?
So the only thing I'm going to add to that is if you think the pushback is only going to come from Ottawa
Mhm.
and from Canada, think again. The British imperialist system of which we are founded upon is going to push back. The EU will push back. China will push back. So we are headed into a number of different events and obstacles that will be put in our path. And this is where I keep telling people, be courageous, because courage is contagious. And then not only that, confidence builds more confidence. So be prepared. Expect the bad news. Expect the setbacks, but do not let that discourage you, because we know they're going to do these things. Danielle Smith, when we talked about the Alberta pension plan, what did she do? She put a bill in the path of achieving that goal that said we now have to have a referendum. Why, if you are trying to accomplish a goal, would you put an obstacle in your own path? So we are going to have our own government put obstacles in our path. Do not get discouraged. Expect it. Go, here we go. We knew this was coming. And let's keep moving forward.
So Bruce, some people suggest that the constitutional amendment formula, the 750 rule, will apply and can block Alberta's departure. Can you expand on that?
Sure. So this is an amendment, essentially an amendment to the Constitution to, for Alberta to leave, which is not contemplated in the written Constitution. Our written Constitution does not say, oh, by the way, if a province wants to leave, here are the things it has to do. So this is a change to the Constitution that happens outside the written text. And that's why the Supreme Court of Canada decision from 1998 is so important, because it basically lays out the legitimacy and the possibility of doing just that. So the 750 won't directly apply in the sense that once you have the mandate to negotiate, those negotiations will take place and maybe you'll reach a deal or you won't. But it is the content of that negotiation that will determine what happens next, and not the normal 750 process itself.
Fun question for everybody. How many people in here think that Quebec is terrified we get there first?
I assure you, if we leave, they will leave too, because the bank account is going to get very dry.
And let's go further. Let's go further. Here's the thing, folks. If you succeed in this, you could save yourselves, and you should do that. You can save Western civilization, and you should do that. But you might also end up saving the country. Not because you have a responsibility to do that, but because you'll do that inadvertently, right? So one thing that might happen is that Alberta leaving will start a cascade, a chain reaction, right? So once you're on the way out, Saskatchewan might say, well, don't leave without us. We want to come too. And Quebec has got its own thing going. Suddenly, you literally have a country that is all split up and not viable. And we either end up as a whole bunch of little countries on our own, which is fine, or you might get a moment finally inside this country where they actually have to look at themselves in the mirror and confront the fundamental flaws in the way the country is built. Right now, you are a distant province of the Laurentian Empire, right? That's the thing that has to change. And if it doesn't change in Canada as a whole, then the country will go down. But it is the thing that you can trigger. You can trigger the saving of this country.
There was a part two to my question. Part two being, we'll go back a few years to the Meech Lake Accord. We'll even go back about 3-4 years before that. We've got a lot of lessons we can, learn from what Quebec did. And we need to really be finding out what they did not do right, not what they didn't do wrong, what they didn't do right, where we should be looking at that same aspect. There's a lot of people in this room that are younger than me. And just to let you know what happened there, when when Quebec decided it was going to separate, it went through the referendum process. The elections went through. There was the Party du Québécois that opened up its doors, and all of a sudden, Quebec is on the way out, and we're all leaving. And then the Meech Lake Accord happened, and we don't want you to go, but here's what we want to do, which was unfortunate for Canada. I'll be honest. So my question here is, are we going to learn from what they're doing and use that as the, I don't want to use tort law, but from what they've done to say, hey, you did it here, we can do it here as well in Canada, regardless of what was passed by exemplar?
Can I ask you a question in
Sure,
return?
go ahead.
Tactically, politically, what mistakes do you think Quebec may have made that we could learn from? How would you do it differently?
Their approach back to negotiations. Now, you look at it now, Alberta gives Quebec 18 billion a year,
Yeah.
and that's a lot of money. That's, a
Right.
lot of money. So what we would do there, or what I think what they did wrong, was they should have said, we're going, we're leaving, we have our resources, goodbye.
Oh, yes.
Now, don't get me wrong, Quebec is just not robbing from Alberta, they also rob from Newfoundland.
Well, but I think we're asking two different questions
Yeah, it
here,
is.
right? So I think it makes sense to say, all right, why did Quebec get so close to approving the referendum, but sort of just lost it a little bit? How can we make sure that that's not the result here? The other question I think is not comparable, or not, it is dangerous to ask. And the question is this: after Quebec lost narrowly its referendum, it did very well. You're describing the kind of equalization payments it gets, right? It would be a mistake for Alberta to expect the same treatment if you narrowly lose the referendum, right? Quebec is the favorite child of Confederation. Okay, everybody wants it to stay. But if you try to leave and you fail, okay, well, now you're in Ottawa's bad books for sure, like you're not already. A close result that is also a loss is not a statement. At least it's not a statement other than this: the powers that be in Ottawa, any kind of a loss will be interpreted and framed as, look, everything is fine. We'll carry on the way we are because they voted no. Okay? You have to win. There is no good no vote.
I'm going to try to think of my question here and make it clear. So I agree, like it takes courage to just do the thing. And jumping from a burning building takes courage, but it's also necessary for survival. But it would also be good to kind of have a plan to survive the fall as well. So I guess my question would be a kind of a two-part. So it's to do with the United States. So we know the building's on fire and we're jumping, or many people recognize that and they're jumping. It's hard to see who's got the plan. Like I get the idea that we have to do this first and then have the Constitution and all that. And that may have been a tactic, maybe even 5-10 years ago. That would have, you would have that time. But right specifically now, we're dealing with the superpower next door who is in an expansion mode. And it's pretty obvious that it's like imperialism is on the rise. And that superpower cannot have unrest on its border. And so likely if it was a yes, even if it was not a yes, it's going to create that unrest without that clear message of what the plan is to be sovereign, to be independent, to have a plan. We're going to just on a basic level, just to say the plan, big giant downstairs, the plan is to be a trade partner. This is how that's going to work. The plan is to have a free democratic society and a constitution that looks like this. That's the plan. And then you'd get some feedback probably from the United States to say like, yes or no. Attention, like we can sugarcoat it all we want. This is like, the fact is they're going to make a move and decide how that kind of goes. So my question would be, what is the messaging from us or from who's running this thing to show that messaging or to send that messaging down to the United States to say, give us a second here to sort this thing out? What is their messaging back? It's hard to see that right now in news media or anything you're listening to out of the States. So is there any one person, is there any one way we can put forward a constitution before this all happens that we all kind of agree?
I'll start. I'm going to reframe that a little bit, because with Alberta, the majority of our trade goes south, not east-west. So we are Alberta, Saskatchewan somewhat, more closely aligned with our southern neighbors. Now, here's a question, and I think this is the point I was trying to get at in my talk, was the world is reorganizing. We're going back to the old days of a Monroe Doctrine, to the protection of the Western Hemisphere, because the United States is acknowledging that we are going to have different superpowers now, and we're going to have to compete. And I got a question for everybody in here and every Canadian. Do you honestly believe that the United States is going to allow their largest border, which has generally been undefended, because we've had such good relations with our neighbors to the south? Do you believe they're going to allow you to allow China to come in here and establish defense systems, take our resources? This is what's going on with Greenland, right? So we have a decision to make as Canadians. Who do our values align with? And this is why I say, stop driving the car looking in the rear view mirror. We have to look forward, not to our futures. I know what the average median age in here is. We have to look at this from our children. Will they have freedom? Will they have prosperity? When I, as a chartered investment manager, look at where the markets are going, because everything runs cycles. Yes? Anybody own any silver? Right? It's running a really nice cycle right now. It's taken a long time to get there, but it's also manipulated for a very long time. But here's the thing. Which direction is Canada moving in? Everything is about patterns. I look at patterns. Canada, is it moving in the right direction? Is it moving towards more freedom, greater prosperity? No, it's not. The United States, on the other hand, and I've explained that a little bit, what Trump is doing, they're moving to a sovereign nation where they take back the control from globalists, and they're going to make the decisions for their citizens. Do we want to align with that? I would hope so.
And this, no, but this is why this is going to be a huge fight. Like it might end up being that Alberta is the place where this conflict actually becomes concrete. Like, here's a province that wants to go that way, and the rest of the country wants to go that way. And all of the people, all of the countries, all the forces that are infiltrating Canada, insisting that they go that way, are seeing that Alberta actually wants to go that way. And it's not just Ottawa who will be determined to defeat it. And it's not just the managers inside Alberta. They will also not want this to happen. But it will be the Chinas of the world who will say, well, this we cannot let this happen. On the other hand, as you're describing, the Americans will be all over this. Like, yes, this is the way to disrupt all the bad things that are going on our northern border. which we don't want to happen. And so let's work with this, right? But to the question of how to identify what's going to happen ahead of time, let's just observe another difference between Quebec's experience and yours. In Quebec, there was a political party, a political leader, a political campaign that was the tip of the spear in the endeavor to become independent. You had champions of the idea in office. That is not the case here. Normally, you would say that this kind of framing, the formulation, the description of what's going to happen would be done by the people in power, by your premier, by your cabinet, by your government. This is what's going to happen. This is our plan after we go. But they don't want to do that. They don't want to own this until they can see the numbers, right? They want to see where the parade is actually going to go before they get to the front. And that means there is nobody in charge. There is nobody in charge with the authority or the place to say, this is the plan. As soon as the petition is received, the signatures are satisfied, they're received by the government. At that stage, the government of Alberta has control over the process. They even have control over the question. They can change the question. They can decide when the referendum is going to be held. And then, because of the amendment that I mentioned, then they can decide whether or not to carry through with it or not. Okay? So you have an internal political challenge in Alberta in terms of determining all the questions that were asked.
To directly answer your question, if there's been a delegation or anything, and I have to bring it up because there's been several delegations down there by Jeffrey Rath, Mitch Sylvester, and Dr. Modry. And the response from the U.S. State Department is they'll recognize the results. So go ahead and do that. And they gave the same promise to Quebec.
Can I just add, though, that that's very good news to the extent that it is true. That's very good news. But in order for the United States to recognize Alberta as an independent nation, you have to have Alberta declare itself as an independent nation. And if the powers that be don't want to do that, then there's nothing for the U.S. to recognize, right? So you're still in the same kind of problem.
Correct. And the caveat to that is they are not official. They're not authoritative. They just started a citizen conversation there.
It will be lovely to see Donald Trump's tweet, though, the day after, going, "Congratulations, Alberta, on achieving Alberta independence. We look forward to working with you." Just a tad bit of pressure.
I can't go in front of the speakers.
Come up.
With the Chinese have taken all over the resources like the oil companies. And secondly, what's happening with the East Indians are all taking over all the business in Alberta right now. 90% of the businesses in Alberta are taken over by East Indians.
Okay, so the question for the online audience is what's going on with China, East India, and their resource allocation collection in Canada and Alberta?
Do you want to go first?
No, you go first.
So immigration is an interesting thing because Alberta is not really Albertan anymore, right? We are pretty much the minority. We have had people come in from all over the world with different cultures, different backgrounds. I don't mind that people want to come here from all over the world and be a part of our productive society. But it was actually Milton Friedman who talked about immigration and the threats that immigration created economically. And economically, what he said was immigration at one time, especially when America was built, because we're all immigrants, we're all here from somewhere else. Right? But we came here and we put down roots and we went to work. And there was no legalized plunder because there was no government with any power here to be able to give to you or to give to you. There was no social welfare net to catch you. You came here, you went to work, you made it on your own. Right? And Albertans like it that way. Now, East is a little bit different. But now what's happening, and this is why politics, and this is why we have such a short window, I believe, to get this right, is because our demographics are changing, to your point. And people are moving here, and many of them are not coming here with jobs. And then they're bringing mom and dad and uncle and auntie from all around the world, and they are dependent upon the welfare state. So they are taking from those who are productive and giving to those who are not. Now, what's really interesting, and I'm going to give you a stat because this is one worth talking about. Canada today, about 25% of all Canadian labor is directly employed by government. Directly. Okay? Another 25% is NGOs and people who are indirectly employed by government, but all supported by the entrepreneur and the businessman and woman who are contributing. Now, one of the things that I come up against all the time is you get the teachers, the doctors, who feel like you're attacking their value that they add to society.
And the professors.
Right? And their professors. You can attack him all you want. He can handle his own. But here's the reality. It's not a matter of value. They are not productive citizens. Productive means you are adding to the pot. Every teacher takes out of the pot. And then they look at you and go, but I pay taxes too. But you pay taxes with the dollar I gave you. It is not adding anything to our economy. So this is the problem with government continually growing and growing and growing, and why the productive part of society struggles, because we have this happening everywhere in the world. We've created these welfare systems. So, you know, with respect to some of that in China, China has taken over many resources around the world using debt and loans. And then when you can't repay it, they just now own the resources. Carney is over there making deals. What is an investment? An investment means I'm going to give you this much money and we want a return on our money, right? What Carney is doing, I call extraction. He is selling Canadian resources directly out from underneath Canadians. He's saying, you come over, take our resources, and then take it back to China and use them over there. He's not creating jobs. He's not creating long-term wealth or stability or growth here. They're doing it in China. So these are the things when we start talking about economic things and policy, you know, again, we have to be really careful about who we align with.
And I want to ask this question. What is the root problem? Besides bad government, what's the root problem? In the Western Hemisphere, we do not have a replacement birth rate, which is one reason, one of the rationales for having such high levels of immigration. Now, for a good while, Canada's immigration system worked pretty well. It was the envy of the world because it selected very highly qualified entrepreneurial people into the country. That changed during the reign of Trudeau Jr. And now we have all kinds of people who are not in that situation who create the welfare problem that you're alluding to. But it is possible to have a good immigration system. But the real problem is that the birth rate problem is a problem that we have created for ourselves, right? You shouldn't need to import people from elsewhere in order to have a sustainable society. And one of the first things we ought to do to fix the situation is to remove the legal reasons why the birth rate is low. Because there are some, right? And I won't go into it, and there are different theories about it, but it is in part a result of government policies. Again, it's the government interfering in things that in part mean that people don't have kids. at least not as many as they would and not as soon as they would.
We have another question here.
Well, I think we have to somewhat look backwards so we don't repeat going forward. And I feel that, well, let me ask a question. Could you elaborate on what you mean by an administrative state? I'm thinking 1930s Italy, Germany, in that, like what with the power in the PMO and the picking of winners and losers in industry and commerce.
Yes, absolutely. So the administrative state, I like to call it the managerial state. What are we talking about? This is actually a very old thing. It's been in process for a long time. Some say early 1900s, depending upon the country. Okay, you have constitutions that claim to be built on the idea of checks and balances. You know, we're protected by checks and balances. The legislature supervises the executive and reviewed by the courts. As long as you have separation of powers between legislature and executive and courts, then you're safe because power resides nowhere. It's diffused. But that's not the reality anymore. Instead, these three branches that are supposed to check each other are actually cooperating because they share a vision. And the vision is managerial. They all seem to believe that the purpose of government is to manage. And so what happens is this. The legislature, and this is not just in Canada, but very much so in Canada, legislatures pass statutes. Now, we think statutes, they contain the rules. And there are still statutes that contain rules. But the other thing these statutes do is delegate authority to the executive branch, the ministries, the agencies, the departments, the commissions, to make the rules, the regulations, the guidelines, the directives, and so on. And as long as they have that delegated authority, then the managers will decide what the rules are that you are subject to. And instead of making the rules in the legislature where everybody can see what the debate is and what the bill says and so on, these are rules made in back rooms that will be applied to you basically without your knowledge until it happens. Okay? Now, the courts are supposed to oversee this and make sure that the executive doesn't go beyond its powers. It's part of the checks and balances. 1, 2, 3, legislature, executive, courts. But the courts now, especially in this country, have now established a regime of deference to the executive branch. That is, if in doubt, let them do what they want to do. Okay. So here's what I call this the unholy trinity of the administrative state: delegation from the legislature, deference from the courts, leads to discretion of the deep state to do basically whatever it wants. And this checks and balances myth has become a myth.
So can I give you a little bit of a real world example? On the economic side, the government has determined that it knows better than the free markets. But that's what it's done. That's the managerial state. So they pick and choose the winners and the losers. The government gave $15 billion to Stellantis. And what does Stellantis do? Picked up and moved that over to the United States and gave them $13 billion and reestablished over there. The government sets up a pension plan because they think that you are incapable of managing your own money. But here's a really good one: housing. So you have Mark Carney right now who's developed a brand new government department, a brand new government division, because he says housing is a problem. It's not affordable. We can't build enough. Well, do you think the government who's done anything efficient or, effective in their life is more effective than the free market? What's the obstacle? Government, administration, bureaucracy, permits, permissions, timelines. Those are all the problems to housing. And the government just made them worse. So that's the administration versus the free market economy, which should pick the winners and the losers. Why? Because who's the free market? You vote with your dollar. Every dollar you spend is a vote for what you want, and every dollar you don't spend is a vote for what you don't want. It's a clear signal to the market to either increase supply or decrease supply. It's an increase or a signal to the market to build more, to do less. Oh, that was a failed experiment. And the consequence is immediate. What does the government do every time it fails? Make it bigger, right? They can't admit failure, so they just make it worse.
And this country has become a country of people who do not understand any of that. So when they hear, well, we're going to change the single-payer public healthcare system, they hear we're not going to have any healthcare, and that's not what we're talking about at all. What you're doing is changing the nature of the system so that you can go and buy your own healthcare in a market that will provide you with more choice and better prices. But that's not what people understand. So this is a real problem.
Hello, I'm from the government and I'm here to help. Can we go ahead and talk about land lock?
Sure. Do you want to go?
I can go first.
All right.
So everybody wants to believe that Alberta is landlocked, and this is a major problem. There are other landlocked countries in the world that do extremely well, right? This is not a catastrophic failure. And here's what I always tell people when they ask me that question. What's to the west of us? There's this beautiful province called British Columbia, which has fallen, sadly, into the hands of communism, in my opinion. But what do they have over there? They have this big port in Vancouver. Well, where do those goods go? Straight across this land mass called Alberta. Well, you don't want to play ball with us. We don't have to play ball with you. We'll take our ball and go home. You want to come across Alberta's territory, no problem. Whether it's by air, whether it's by land, it's obviously not by sea, but we'll just charge you. So do we now have leverage to negotiate terms with BC? Do you think Ottawa is going to want the goods that come off those ships in the ports, right? So they have a choice to make. So when people look at me and they see we're landlocked, I'm like, can we pick a harder one to discuss? Because that one's a really simple solution.
Yeah, I agree. Of course. I think the question should be put this way, or the situation should be put this way. You're landlocked now. You're always going to be landlocked. The question is whether or not you want to be landlocked as an independent country with the ability to negotiate, or whether or not you want to be landlocked as a province in a country that does not want you to succeed.
You mentioned in the past something that's easy to do and then something not so easy to do.
Number one, number two. It's easy.
Oh, yes. Oh, I like this. Yes, so this relates back to being a free country. And there are people in your midst who will have different visions about what a free and independent Alberta ought to be. But there's also a moment and a need for a reality check about what some of those plans are, what some of those aspirations are. And I like to put it this way. If you want to live in a free society, then there are two things that you want. And the first one is easy, and the second one is hard. The first one is that you do not want other people to tell you what to do, right? That is easy to want. The second one is you do not want to tell other people what to do, because that's what makes a free society. And there are a lot of people who really want to tell other people what to do. So when we are formulating what this, new constitution might look like, or the new governing system, or your new laws, My hope is that we'll watch out for the inclination to say, well, we know what the truth is, and therefore all of you will live this way. Because now you're telling people what to do. The mark, the measure of our free society is whether everybody is protected from being coerced, and otherwise they can do whatever they want because they're not interfering with you.
So don't be a Karen.
Thank you both very much for being here. Give it up for our two speakers. Oh, we got one more question. We'll sneak it in there.
Okay, the question I have, I've always said it's freedom as long as people don't infringe on your rights and you don't infringe on their rights. So how do we define what our rights are and what your rights are?
He wants them in the frame.
It was me in the frame.
Yeah.
Keep going.
All right.
I think that's the big question, is what our rights are and what people's other rights are, and how we don't infringe on them.
I think Bruce made that very clear, though. We don't have to define what your rights are. Your right is to not be coerced and to not be forced to do something that you do not want to do.
So let me make this point. So because of the way our Constitution is, we have a Charter of Rights, and even the U.S. Bill of Rights is this way. It lists all your rights. And, we think, well, the list is not long enough. We have to add to the rights because, after all, the ones we have didn't work very well. And so there must be gaps, and there are gaps. There are huge gaps, right? So let's add to the rights. But this is a mistake. We've come to think that we have freedom of speech and freedom of religion and freedom of association and the right to this and the right to that. And we have all these little bits, but actually these are just instances of one single thing. The one single thing is you're supposed to be free. And free means you are not subject to the coercion of other people or the state, period. So the danger in listing rights is you're going to miss some. And because you missed them, the state is now able to tell you what to do. This is exactly what happened during COVID. They said, you will do this, and you will do that, and you will do this. And look, there are no rights in this list that say that we can't do this. So we can. And that was the legal result. Okay? So I'm trying to get people off the idea that the solution to your freedom is to list a whole long list of particular rights. That is not going to work. You have to establish a different kind of architecture so that the default is different and so that the default position is you are free, period. And if they want to justify an infringement on that freedom, then they're going to have to do some somersaults.
So on that note, I'm not going to coerce you, tell you what to do or anything like that, but I will invite you to go check out the vendors at the back. And thank you all very much for being here. Really appreciate it. And thank you to Bruce and Nadine. You guys have been fantastic.
Thanks for coming.
Thanks for coming. Share this out and God bless.